I had a eucalyptus tree to take down last week, and it was in somebody's front yard. We roped down all the branches, and then I got to a point where there was some plants and some irrigation, and maybe I was just getting a little bit anxious to get it done, but I decided to fell the trunk. But you've got to be careful when you fell something that's on a slight hill. Um, Interestingly, there was a guy doing some gardening work there, and I asked him to hold the camera for me. Now, there's a couple of things that are a little bit unusual about this drop. One, the yard is mounded, and I recognized that, but also I left the trunk long enough where it would hit the street and possibly the gutter. So I had to make a very accurate cut. I had to really stop and look at where I was going. I also had Jorge on a rope that was giving a little bit of a tug. But had I dropped it and it hit the curb, it would have cost me a lot of money to fix the curb. But I was willing to take the risk. Here, I'll just let you go ahead and watch this. Note how the log kicked up in the air. That could be very, very dangerous. Here, let me show it to you again. Oh, that could have killed me. But I laid some wood down on the gutter, and you can see that I bridged the concrete gutter, and I laid it out in such a way that I knew I was going to hit it. But you've also got to be very careful when you drop something heavy like this on wood on the ground that it doesn't pick it up and throw it. That's a whole nother subject. So I loaded up all these pieces of wood. I took them in 3 and 4 foot sections. We put them in the small truck, and I dropped them off at my house. And you know what? I'm not even certain which species of eucalyptus this is. It's not the local blue gum that we have, but the leaves look a lot like the blue gum. Maybe one of you guys out there from Australia that recognizes eucalyptus really well can help me out on this one. Sometimes I hand cut a chunk. That's a different type of wood altogether. I took a log, a small log. It's a quite old tree. It's a Japanese maple. I don't find Japanese maple trunks that are not rotted very often. And I took it over to my friend's band mill, and I sliced it up into 1/2-inch boards. I have an idea for some interesting jewelry boxes. When you're drying a log, you have to allow for airflow so that the moisture can wick off. And when you make a stack of wood that you want to keep in sequential order for book matching purposes or whatever, it's a good idea to rebuild the log the way that it was milled. I've got some friends that actually take every single board and number them for future reference. They'll go 1A, 1B, 2A, 2B, so that everything is marked up. And that's actually a really good idea. I don't think I'm going to go to that effort today. I might number it after the log is dried when I disassemble it. But for right now, I'm going to put it all together with 3 stickers. These are called stickers. And I've got a whole bunch of old trim molding that's gotten kind of old, and I can utilize that as my stickers. Okay, so I milled all these pieces into 1/2-inch boards, and after I plane them, they'll go down to about 3/8, which is quite thin, except for reasoning why I want thin boards. I'm looking at making a number of jewelry boxes, but I may want to build something else, so I opted to leave one piece a little bit bigger in case I want to make some leg stock out of it. But I'm going to add that to the pile as well. Ideally, what you want to do in something like this is, once you've got it all together, you want to crimp it tight so that as it shrinks, the tightness keeps everything from moving and warping and twisting. But you also have to remember that in time, you have to come back in and readjust these tightenings. Sometimes I'll do it with wire. I used to have a band clamp setup that worked pretty well. But then you have to put little wedges in underneath the bands to keep it nice and tight. You can do the same thing with baling wire. And I'd put 3 of them on here, one on either end and one in the middle. And to keep tightening them up, just got a little wedge and tap it up underneath it, and just tap, 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 and keep it nice and tight. Now the 1/2-inch boards will dry relatively fast. Typically, when you're talking about drying times for lumber, people say if you're going to air dry, it's 1 year per inch of thickness. But I find when you cut much thinner boards, like these 1/2-inch boards, these will be dry in 4 to 5 months, a little bit faster. And it also depends upon how you store it, where you store it. If there's good airflow, I don't want to store it outdoors. I want to put this under cover somewhere. But if you've got good flow through it, then it'll dry faster. I've heard some people actually even put a fan up next to it to help pull off some of the moisture. I don't have a kiln. I wish I did. I've often thought about building a solar kiln for this kind of stuff, and maybe that's a project I'll talk to Toby about. If I help him build a kiln, then helping means that I could store some of my lumber in there too. Now, putting the wires around it to keep it intact means that the stickers won't move, and you can also move the pile around. So what I'm doing here is I'm putting it out in the sun to damp off. If you just put it immediately into the shade and it's all wet, you've got more of a chance for discoloration from mold and mildew to set in.